welcome to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is military affairs, and basically we're going to see if what the current situation is in Ukraine, and we're going to mostly focus on the power grid and the problems that Ukraine are experiencing at this stage. Okay, so if you haven't been aware of that, well, let me first start off. Currently, you will find that most of the pro-Russian punters don't have a lot of topics to talk about because there's not much actually happening, and there's not actually much to report. And unless you want to hear about daily skirmishes and daily attacks of the Ukrainians on the Russians and the slow progress that the Russians are making, then I'm sure it's going to get very boring. So have you also noticed I haven't made a lot of videos about the Russian-Ukrainian war at this stage? But I thought that I will address a certain topic that has become a big issue. It is constantly being narrated in the pro-Russian side as well in the pro-Western side. And that is the missile attack of the Russians on the power transmission network of Ukraine. And according to some sources, there's about 40% of the Ukrainian power transmission system is damaged and basically out of operation. And but this number is a little bit difficult to confirm because the narrative that's in the pro-Russian side is a circular movement. They read each other's articles. The same happens in the pro-Western side. It's a circular narrative. Each one is quoting each other's figures and numbers and information. And then there's even sometimes pro-Russian guys that read the pro-Western side articles, and they bring it into the pro-Russian narrative. But nothing is really, no precise detail is basically available. And this makes this whole situation a little bit unknown. And one has to be careful on how you interpret the data. Now, the Russians have explicitly stated, and you must remember this piece, is that they're going to destroy only military targets. They're not going to destroy any civil infrastructure. And by that I mean, or I understand, they will focus on transmission substations, or nodes if you want to call it, that supply power to military installations, the railway system to transport Western weapons to the front and logistical supplies, as well as, I don't know, but the problem is any power transmission that can be used for, or is currently being used for military purposes. And one has to keep this in mind because this is a very important factor. Now, as you have also heard, Kiev is basically sort of stated as having not enough electricity. There was a video made by Gonzalez leader who sits in Kharkiv, who's experiencing darkness and power cuts, etc., etc., etc. Well, as you know, I'm sitting in South Africa. And in South Africa, we have an inherent power supply problem. Our electrical power transmission and generation system is stuffed. We are experiencing, we call it shutdowns. The Europeans or the Ukrainians will use will call it blackouts. Americans will sometimes experience it during harsh winters where certain sectors are cut off and the electricity supplies is interrupted. But in South Africa, we have shutdowns, which are planned. Well, this is not going on for a couple of months. It's now going on for years. And the South African system has been, shutdown system has been well regulated now, or well controlled, in order not to allow our power system to totally collapse. So South Africa and we as citizens of South Africa are well used to your so-called blackouts. And I can't now quote totally South African amount of days that we have been subjective to blackouts, but it's more than half of the year. Yeah, you can say that. More than half of the year we have been, the days we had shutdowns. We have different levels of doing, level 1, 2, up to 8. But the most it has ever gone up is 6, level 6, and in level 6, we have about, I think, 8 hours of blackouts. The 8 hours are not continuous. The maximum length is usually 4 hours. But then we might have 2 sessions of 4 hours, or 1 of 4 hours, and 2 of 2 hours. But the average is between level 3 and 2. And that translates about 3 hours. I would say some days you get 2 hours, some days you get 4 hours, and on a level 3 you get always 4 hours, and sometimes even 6 hours, depending on how the days go. And our biggest problems is that we were never used to blackouts. So our transformers that were, they called the nodes or transmission formers and so on, they were old and they were never switched off or cycled as we are now. And we had a lot of damage in terms of transformers that were blowing out. Now, the European systems, which everybody says is going to suffer this winter, will also have a lot of scheduled maybe blackouts. And they will switch on transformers and nodes, and those things will also blow up. It's not the transformer per se that always blows up. It is the switch that goes with it. You have to switch something up, and if you switch it, there's usually a spike. And these are high voltage ones, and in South Africa, actually, people died. They were standing near to a power station or node, and when they switched it on, the whole thing exploded, and I think 4 or 6 people died. So it's a dangerous operation. So most of them are actually switching a smaller switch, switching another switch, and then switching the power switch on. So it's like a chain system that you implement. Well, the narrative is that the Russians now have destroyed a huge part of these nodes, and it caused a number of nuclear power plants in Ukraine to shut down, and this is creating a problem, and this puts pressure on the population of Ukraine, and the general idea is that either the population will revolt or they will become fed up with paying the price that they have to pay to be loyal or nationalistic, or they would mostly emigrate to the western parts of Europe. Well, the latter is a bit of a problem because, yes, the Ukrainians have fled to Western nations or European nations at the beginning of the war, and the more articles you read, the more you find out that, oh, they abused the system. There were a lot of Ukrainians that demanded support, that gamed the system and went there, collected the money, and then went back to Ukraine. And basically the Polish are fed up, the Germans are fed up, the French are fed up, and everybody else, the British are fed up. And, you know, the charity towards the Ukrainians are slowly and slowly deteriorating in the West. So, well, now it is necessary for the Ukrainians to really go and flee the war or the problems. And they now kind of flee to a Western world that is semi-hostile to them. And then Europe has their own problems. I mean, their own so-called energy problems, which I don't fully agree, but we left that to an argument that, well, a disagreement between me and the other pro-Russian hunters. In any case, well, you also should know now I'm an engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm not an electrical engineer. So don't confuse the two. I am not an expert on electrical systems. But as an engineer, I always argue that any problem can be solved. So how can Ukraine's energy problem or energy or electrical problem be solved? And is it really that crucial what the Russians have done? And unfortunately, my argument is no. Yes, it can be repaired. Yes, it creates a lot of problems. Yes, it's not easy, but it's not unsurmountable task. Can be done. And it doesn't have to take 2 or 3 or 4 years, depending on how you approach it. Now, electrical transmission system is a lot complicated. It's not simple putting a wire there, putting a wire there, and then everything functions. There's a lot of things that have to be considered. But if you're an expert on the phone, then that is your specialty field, and then you should be able to solve the problem. The biggest problem is actually destructions of transformers, which has to convert high voltages down to medium voltages, and then they are distributed into a city, and then they are from medium voltages to low voltages, say to 20 volt. Now, the difference between Soviet-era transformers and Western one is that they operate at much higher voltage. If I look at the voltages that are currently being used in Ukraine, they range up from 220 kilovolt, 330 kilovolt, 400 kilovolt, and the highest is 750 kilovolt. Now, if you compare it, say, to Germany's transmission network, they work on 220 volt, a kilovolt, and 380 kilovolt. And now they're going to, that's for AC, and now they install some DC, direct current, and those transmission lines will run at 525 kilovolt. Now, these are enormous high voltages, but they are not on the same level as the voltages used currently in Ukraine. And the higher voltages you use, the further it can be transmitted at any stage, so the longer your lines can be, and also the more power it can generate. Because at the end of the day, what's important is not the voltage, it's the ampere. And it's amps that create heat, and that is amps that are being lost. Well, yes, voltage as well, but not to the same extent. So the higher you can push the voltage, the less transmission losses you have. But that's only a small technicality. But there's another thing that goes with it. Actually, you can call, there are multiple things that go with it, but 2 important things. The first thing is that the isolation switch, the one that switches you on and off, completes the circuit. That has to be rated for the higher voltage. Because voltage can jump over an air gap. The higher the voltage is, the further the voltage can jump across a bigger air gap space, and that can create a short. It's like a spark plug in a car. It doesn't work on 12 volts. It goes pumped up to 3,000 volts or 32 kilovolts. And I think 10,000 kilovolts jumps 1 centimeter. Can jump a centimeter, if I remember correctly. But don't quote me on that. And then the second one is the insulation discs. You have to insulate the power lines from the steel towers in order not to short the ones to ground, and also other insulation problems that go into the transformers, design of the transformers, design of the switchgear, etc., etc. So every component that works at these higher voltages has to be rated or be able to insulate and ensure that there is no short to ground or short to the other lines. And that is important. Now, unfortunately, to build a transformer, in my opinion, whether it's 500 volts or 750 volt, yes, it will require some design changes, but it shouldn't be that difficult. One of the things that actually all these pro-Russian punters sort of miss is that they quote an auto transformer. Now, you get 2 types of transformers. You have the traditional transformer that we all know, you know. 1 coil here, 1 coil there, interaction of the coils, high voltage, lower voltage, or vice versa. And then these change voltage out, and they are downgraded, and, well, 220 volt of And here you get 12 volt. That's how normal transformers work. We all should have seen it by now. If you haven't seen it, go and look it up. Well, it has two cores, and that is the standard transformers. This is semi-old technology, if you want to call it. An auto transformer, and it is easy to go and Google it. So I don't know why these guys don't go and fact check their narratives. It's a much simpler design. It only has one coil, and then at least 3 tap-off points. But it's only one. It's a lot cheaper, a lot smaller. It is more efficient. Let me read it to you, because otherwise I'm going to miss it again. They are smaller, they are lighter, and they are cheaper than typical dual wind transformers. But the disadvantage is they don't provide any electrical insulation between the primary and the secondary circuits. Other advantages of auto transformers include lower leakage reactance, lower losses, lower excitation currents, and increased voltage VAs, voltage amps. Now you will see mostly on generators there are usually a kilowatt rating, and then there's a VA rating. Kilowatt is more or less approximate kilo power that they can show, but the real issue is the voltage amp. That gives you a more accurate indication on what the circuit or the transformer or the motor or the generator is really applicable. So auto transformers are not automatic mechanisms, as been tried to convey by our commentators and narrators. No, it's not that. It's a much simpler design. So, now Russia has probably destroyed a number of transformers. Now, I have not worked in the electrical field on transformers. That's not about it. But I have been involved in corrosion protection of these transformers. So I've been to nodes, and I've been to power substations, and there are usually some spare transformers available. I more or less know the technical, the physical layout of the stuff and so on, and the power lines. And well, I presume a missile has probably destroyed that site. And what might be, there might be a lot of transformer oil and transformer parts and copper bars and so on lying around. And then a lot of wires and insulators. And these unfortunately have to now be replaced. Depending on the missile also used and the amount of explosive power, one has to think about how big area did it really destroy. So maybe they destroyed some of the switchgear as well, or maybe the switchgear got burned out, or they are usually separated from the transformer. Well, in any case here in South Africa, I don't know there. So one has to be replaced. Well, the minimum, in my opinion, is the transformer. And the switchgear, maybe. And some of the insulators. Wires is fairly available, so that's not a problem. The Ukrainians should have enough insulating material, so that shouldn't be either a problem. So the two main components they have to source is the transformer and the switchgear. Now, one has to remember this is a Soviet-era electrical system. It's not fully compatible with Western European countries' system. Like I said, I looked up France one. France has more or less the same voltages as Germany and other countries in the EU. But, just for the sakes, Europe is also supplying Ukraine with power. And the way that they do is they translate it into from the AC, which we all know, up to a certain point, convert it to DC, do the DC transfer and generate an AC again. And there we go, and have the higher voltage or the whatever is required to make it compatible with the Ukrainian power system. So there are ways of doing things like that. Then we also have, I looked up, Hungary has the same power system. I'm not sure about Poland, but Estonia, Latvia, those will have it. And since they are the three Balkan countries are the biggest mouthpieces and kefirkis that are trying to instigate the battle and instigate the big dogs to go and start and fight and so on. You know, those Chihuahua and Purul type of kefirkin, they might as well commit them, put their money where their mouth is and supply Ukraine with a number of transformers because they will have stock. Any Soviet Union, and there's Georgia, which is not under Russians, and I'm sure there are other places where Ukraine can get some transformers from. So it's not that they can't get that. Let's see how willing the other countries are to supply some of their stock to Ukraine. And then if the Americans really want to do, or Europeans really want to do, they can jump in productions and start up manufacturing a couple of transformers. Yes, it's not going to take a day. Now, my neighbor was electrical engineer, and he told me sometimes that you have to have a lead time of at least 12 months to get a transformer from America. Oh, yeah, that's South Africa. You know, we in the back of the queue. So if somebody pushes enough money and he jumps to the front of the queue, and those things will be made first. Well, we see it as some of the weapons being supplied by the Americans and the Europeans to Ukraine are actually earmarked for existing orders from other countries, which is now redirected as a priority in Ukraine. So it's not impossible to do that. So just all in all, the Ukrainian system can be fixed. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is wartime. Russia might decide to bomb it again. So don't go and do the repair as a perfect repair. Make the repair as best as you can for it in order, and cheap as you can for it in order to work. That's all that's important. So like I said, you blow up a bridge. You don't, in wartime, you don't go and build a perfect bridge again. You make a plan. You can maybe put a steel structure over it, which is much easier to to produce and so on. And there you go. And it lasts for a year or 2 years until the war is past, or if it's blown up again, then you repeat the action, and that's the same that you have to do with a power system. But like I said in the beginning of the video, is that the Russians had said that they will only blow up and target military usage infrastructure. So take the Russians at their word. Go along, if I was Ukraine, go along your railway systems, accept that your railway system is now defunct, but that's a lower priority than providing electricity to your population. Go move all the transformers that you have along the railway networks. Put it into positions where there is a civilian use for that. Yes, there was a dual purpose, but there is civilian use. Ensure that the network is working, and then inform the Russians. Listen here. These transformers we're going to use now, you can see, there's no train driving. So this is not a military transit. This is now a civil installation. You said you're not going to bomb civilian infrastructure, so don't bomb this one. And then they can go on, and so what they do is they move their existing stock from dual-purpose locations, which hasn't been bombed yet or destroyed, and then take it and they make it solely for civilian infrastructure. And if the Russians then blow it up, then they can go to the UN and to the world and shout, "Ah, look what the Russians have done." So the point here is it's not an unsurmountable task. It can be repaired. If the numbers are right, 60% of the system is still working. What is more important, you need electricity in order for the sewage system and the water supply to work. That is important. No water, no human beings can live there. No sewage, big problems with medical problems, big medical problems. Important stuff. You can still wear a lot of clothes and so on for the heat, but you cannot not drink water. You cannot not go to the toilet. So you have to do it. And that is what I would do. It creates a lot of problems for the Ukrainian government. Make no mistake. The Russians are more or less putting a lot of pressure. But it's not that it cannot, it's critical. It's not that Ukraine will now collapse totally. There are options that they can use to at least restore some civilization. We are talking about the gas storage, no heat. Well, the Russians are not attacking the gas structures. They are attacking maybe some oil storage or diesel storage for fuel, for military purposes. So if Ukraine is, and you know that, don't now deliberately fill your tanks up at the local petrol station. You know, your tanks and your APCs, don't do that. Because then the Russians can destroy that one, and then your automobiles of your population will have none. Don't do it. Don't make explicit targets. And then, like I said, the country is huge. They have to have several systems. Even if they only repair a certain part, then all right, that power station will we keep off, but we will restore these power stations in order to give us enough supplies. Remember, there were supposed 10 million Ukrainians that have left the country since February, of a population, I believe, 40 million. That's a quarter missing, so you have to supply 25% less electricity and water and energy. That's what you have to supply the Ukrainians. But for us in the world, it's ooh, this is bad. It's going to force the Ukrainians now to the negotiation table. Well, again, it's the time. How willing are you to freeze? What temperatures are you willing to absorb? Are you prepared to go to 10 degrees and then give up? Or are you prepared to go to 0 or minus 10 or minus 50? How much comfort are you willing to sacrifice? And that's the whole argument. So I'm not sure that this is the end of the war. And I don't believe that Ukraine will now go to the negotiation table. I don't think it's going to be resolved that easy either. If you look at what we are now going to do, is what the Russians are now going to do, is they're going to bring their 300,000 reservists up to the front. And then they're going to probably start somewhat major offense. But it's not going to be easy for them as well. Men die. It's not good for anybody. The more people you throw in a fight, the more people casualties you will have. And like I said in my other videos, don't ever underestimate your enemy. And in the last video I made, we talked about that the Ukrainians didn't have much military experience, but they were adapting and they were learning as they go. So whatever the Russians faced at the beginning of the SMO, it's not the same type of troops that they are now going to face. And if I was the Ukrainians, I would have started building fortifications, because I know here comes a Russian offense. To what effect they can, I'm not sure. The Russian artillery is still a major issue. But maybe one can find it. This is not, one I must understand, I'm not voting for the Ukrainians. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm just trying to do is to warn you. This is not a simple issue. This is no Hollywood. There are always alternatives. There are always solutions to any problems. The coin always has another side. That is what I'm trying to do. So, in order for you to more sensibly view or understand what is happening, and not think what is happening, but to know what is happening. So it looks bad for the Ukrainians. Yes, it does look. Lots of problems. But problems that can be resolved. And it's not, in my opinion, it's not going to lead to any negotiation. Even if the narrative is that the Americans were talking behind, that's all bullshit. This is like people grabbing for signs that are not relevant. This is a non-event like the missile that fell in Poland. Yes, everybody makes a big war. Everybody makes a big issue. But these people are not stupid. They know precisely what they're talking. And they're pushing the narrative up to a certain point where they don't cross the red line. Well, they do sometimes cross the red line. But not in this case. Panicking, shouting for victory, or I didn't sell the bear's skin before you even shot the bear. That type of narrative saying, I don't know. No. Things are far from over. Far from over. In any case, bottom line is, Europe can help if they want to. America can help if they want to. Old Soviet countries can help if they want to. The system can be fixed. At least enough for the population. And just remember, there are trains, but there are also trucks. And most of the trucks are usually conveyed by low-bed trailers by trucks, tanks. Tanks are mostly, and APCs are mostly transported by low-bed. So, destroying the trains is not the end of the world. There are other means of doing it. And the Europeans are giving gas to, they sponsored gas, or bought it, or gave it, or presented it, or I don't know, to Ukraine. They gave them so many cubic meters of gas. I can't remember what the countries were, but there were 2 of them, I remember. Then fuel and diesel is given by the European countries that support Ukraine. So, just think about this. Nothing is as simple as it seems. That's the right saying. Yeah. That's what I wanted to say. Anyway, guys, that's my story for today. I hope you like what you heard. Subscribe. Share the link. Tell your friends. And until next time, cheers.